Hey, on this episode of The Ethics Experts, we talked to the one and only Cindy Marsh. She runs a cool company called Good Human Improv, where she helps business people, compliance people learn improv skills. And she talks a lot about her improv journey and how that helped her become more effective ethics and compliance officer. So I hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to The Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, hey, bestie, hope you're having an amazing day. You see what happens when you subscribe? You get a free bonus greeting on every single episode. Imagine that. I am here with the one and only Cindy Marsh. She has had a background in compliance for a long time, 20 years-ish. And she's now moved on to starting a company that teaches improv skills for business. And so I met Cindy, I don't know, many years ago, and I've seen her at multiple conferences. I think your presentations are always so exciting and like energizing, and so many of the skills that you teach in those conferences are things that I think we might inherently sort of lack. And so really excited to get you on The Ethics Experts to, you know, pick your brain a little and hear about your journey recently.
I am absolutely excited to be here too. As you mentioned, I've been in compliance for quite a number of years, and it wasn't really until I discovered improv that I became much more flexible in my thinking with regard to regulations and, making business decisions. And so that's how I started wanting to bring improv to business and to other compliance professionals, because I just saw the value in my own life and profession.
So what made you take that first improv class?
I was actually interested in stand-up comedy, and a little bit more personal. I was going through a divorce at the time and decided to take a stand-up comedy class. But it's intensive to do stand-up. I don't know if many people understand how long it takes to write jokes, memorize jokes, and then also go to open mics at night, 11, 12 o'clock in the evening when you have a real full-time job. And so I needed to put that on the back burner and wanted to continue growing my comedic chops. So I found an improv class, and actually from the moment I stepped into that first class, realized that was really more the path for me, because everything is made up on the spot. And it was just a bunch of adults going back to a time where you make believe. And I met a really great group of people that I just continued that journey with.
So where did the stand-up thing come from? You just being told so much just how funny you are?
No, I think it was more of a cathartic, just needing to get out and make humor out of, my current circumstances. And I had always thought that I was gregarious. I wouldn't say funny, but I felt like it was an interesting outlet for me to pursue. And like I said, I didn't really take it much further than kind of like going down to Philly and trying it out for, I think, about 2 years of like a grind of like, I want to make this happen. But in reality, it just didn't end up being for me. So
you got on stage a bunch.
I did.
You're working on that tight five, huh?
Yeah. I actually had a pretty good tight five. Yeah.
Well, let's hear it. Just kidding. Okay, let's it was too hard. I'm kidding. That takes practice. So you go to this improv class, and it was this vibe that like you hadn't had for like a really long time, maybe since you were a kid. You met this great group of people, but in your intro, you mentioned that you saw some new muscles building, or maybe it was a confidence build. Talk to me through that, on how that improv experience. I'd love to kind of understand. I mean, I just love improv. But I'd love to kind of understand, like, what are those exercises, or what in that sort of journey, that improv journey, happened to where you started to see like, oh my gosh, I'm being a little bit more effective, like in my day job now.
Sure. And again, that is exactly the reason why I started my company, Good Human Improv Company, because I found myself becoming a better human. Nobody really wants to admit that maybe, they're a super type A or have a big ego, or might be a little difficult to work with. And I was all of those things, but I didn't know that I was. When you're in a mindset of how you think the right way to do things is, if you're, an overachiever, if you, are really a person that is buying into, the black and white mentality of how regulations are supposed to be and people should be doing the right thing and that there's a right or a wrong. That's really where I started seeing a difference in myself. And one of the things was, just those enhanced communication skills of being able to actively listen to other people without forming an opinion about what they should or shouldn't be doing. And being able to also clearly articulate the reasoning or the way that I was thinking on how someone should be, managing some sort of policy or procedure. And really, I found that I was getting along with people better. Which, again, we work in compliance, and not everyone is inflexible in compliance at all. But we do all know the ramifications of if we don't get it right and what can happen. And we're trying to protect a company. So really, that's what I noticed is the beginning of enhanced communication skills for myself and the positive benefit that it was having on other people.
So it's interesting you put it that way because, assuming you have a reasonable level of like self-awareness, you considered yourself a gregarious person. And I think most people would consider gregarious people as like good communicators.
Right. Yeah.
How did you know? So like you were already pretty good. You know what I'm saying? So like,
sure.
In what ways did you see that your communication was getting better? Were you getting agreement faster? Were you was the velocity of your persuasion or like the efficacy of your persuasion, was that affected? Like, how did you start to see these proof points? Like, oh my gosh, my life is changing as a result of this thing.
Well, good question. Because sometimes gregarious people don't realize that maybe their jokes aren't funny, or maybe don't realize. Yeah. I'm not saying that about you, but like when we are stuck in our own perceptions of ourselves and potentially might have limited emotional intelligence, which I am putting myself in that category. I thought the way that I was doing things was the right way. And, to take that a step backwards, to kind of speak to what, like really what changed in that sense was that I realized that everyone has a different way of thinking. And I know that seems very basic and simple of a concept because we are all very different. But I think one of the things that it did was to actually comprehend that. And the way that I did that is by working in improv scenes and automatically starting to build out what I thought the scene was about. And then the minute somebody throws something different at you, you have to be flexible and adjust to continue, on that improv path. And that was the most profound thing. I'm not sure I answered your question.
You didn't. No, I'm kidding. No, you did. You did answer it. And it kind of leads me to my next question. And this might be a stupid question, but we're just getting started here. So you'll probably hear a lot of these. Like, do you feel like you built a new muscle or do you feel like it was just a perspective shift? Because sometimes when you have a perspective shift, the change is instant. You're like, oh my gosh, fast food's killing me and I'm just never going to have fast food again. Other people, they kind of are on more of a journey. Do you feel like this flexibility was something that you had to iterate through multiple times for you to like build that muscle and be sort of a little bit more like nimble? Or do you feel like going through these exercises the first time, you kind of had a bit of a light bulb moment that allowed you to kind of speed run whatever J curve we're talking about?
No, it is definitely a slow muscle building process. I actually call it improv aerobics. And some other people call it improv yoga, because you are building a muscle. If it's something that you haven't been used to, for creativity, for example, I am definitely not the most funny person you're ever going to meet, but definitely by being able to use improv and out of the box cliche thinking, you grow the muscle. And then when you're aware that it's growing, you really start, you start realizing your potential in those realms. One of the things that I used to say is, I was kind of a jerk, like kind of a bully. And not that I'm proud of myself about that. Again, this is a whole learning journey. And one of the things I was very concerned about how society sees you as a parent, for example. And I was insistent that like my daughter had to go to college. But I also knew like so many improvisers that had like this student debt from college and they weren't using their degree. And had I not met those people through improv and also had a shift of thinking and been able to build these, this thinking muscle of flexibility and adaptability and resilience, I probably would have, forced my daughter to go to college straight out of high school. And she probably would have dropped out, but right. Now she went to college later in life after taking some time. But I do credit again to, just having the ability to grow those various muscles and creating more of a flexibility landscape in thinking. So, yeah.
So, when you learn a new move or something, or you learn a new, like you built this new muscle. Sure. Tell me about like one of the first couple of times that you kind of noticed that you're like, oh, I'm using this now in like the real, in real life. Tell me, can you think of any moments like that where you're like, oh my gosh, this conversation would have gone different had I not employed some of this new kind of improv judo?
Absolutely. So, again, going back to work life, there have been plenty of instances where, I have been in arguments with people at work over, compliance issues. And I think that having the ability to empathize with people in their operational struggles and how are we going to implement something, a change, for example. And, in the past, it would have been like, hey, you need to stop what you're doing. You need to, add headcount. You need to follow this process and, whatever it takes. But when you're able to understand the perspective of others and then also be able to make creative business decisions based on actually having those conversations, you're building trust and then people are more likely to come to you. And, so again, I know you asked for a specific example. One example I have is, we had some shipments that were crossing the border in Mexico and, basically all of the documentation has to be done before it leaves, but this is for trade compliance. But there wasn't a way to get the documentation until the product was loaded, and it was causing my team, stress in the last minute. And again, normally I probably would have like went up the ladder and like, this is unacceptable, but because I could have empathy for the struggles of actually being able to package the product, weighing the product, and making sure that the shipment was full before we received our documentations. That I know I'm kind of stumbling over my words, but I think that is a good example of when I would have not been so flexible.
Do you feel like the core of it, do you feel like the core of that flexibility is a better empathy?
Right, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. I think, the fact is like when you're in your own department of audit, for example, and you audit, no one likes the audit team to come, right? Like nobody wants their processes to be audited. Everybody feels like they're going to be in trouble if they're not doing something right. And, there's this bit of psychological safety that doesn't occur or that there is an opportunity for. But when you have people that have black and white thinking of this is right and this is wrong, we really are not creating psychological safety.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and we are not having empathy for, the actual process and operations and how stressed people might be in trying to uphold, their operations in general. Maybe they're short-staffed. But when you can take the moment, when you have that skill, and it is a skill, you are able to, foster a better culture and where individuals feel comfortable, taking risks and coming to you before there's even a problem, knowing that, they might not get in trouble or be judged or, face ridicule for it, what have you.
Yeah, because that like self-preservation is like the number one blocker for people like engaging authentically. And like if you see a group of improv people together, you often see that their like collective ability for everyone to like flip the switch and turn on. I just visualize it as like these like psychological safety bubbles.
Yes.
Like, okay, cool. Now we're like in this like combined bubble where like my expectations are not dictating it. Yours aren't dictating it. And like, we have to be flexible with each other. Like the famous sort of improv axiom is yes. And you're not like saying, no, we're not going to the diner. You know what I'm saying? Like, which just will kill any kind of a scene. But like, if you think about a business, it's really just a bunch of these like improv scenes happening where, everyone, depending on sort of the plasticity of the bubble that they're sort of controlling, sometimes they're bumping up, sometimes they're, a little bit more kind of collaborative. But I'm just saying stuff is coming out of left field all the time, right? Like the same thing in an improv scene. And your ability to be able to like adapt in real time is probably deeply rooted in that ability for that other person to feel safe enough to like be authentic. Like, because when you're in that flow state, I would imagine like in a true kind of improv scene or, like in exercise, to your point, you have this sort of picture of like, oh, this is probably going this way. And inevitably, probably every single time that shattered. And it's so the muscle or the skill maybe is like your ability to like let that house of cards of, that house of cards of your expectations fall and not like, be frustrated by it, but rather like just kind of roll with the punches a little bit more.
And they call that, in an improv scene, they call that killing your darling, right? Because you come into an improv scene and you have this idea of how you want things to go. And then somebody, gives you a different suggestion. And potentially instead of yes-anding it, you keep trying to push your own agenda. And that's, definitely takes that improv scene down. So it's one thing that you coach into people of, killing your darling. And yes, it absolutely translates to regular business. When I'm doing my workshops and, inevitably there are always people that are like, I could never do improv. And honestly, my response to that is you already do, like you wake up every single morning without a script. You go into your office, you are doing your job. And yes, you know how to do your job, but it's not scripted. You do not know how your day is going to go. And every decision you're making is improv. And that's, and again, going back to the killing your darling is if you have an agenda in compliance where you want people to see things your way, I mean, you go in there with your idea. But by having conversations with people and by fostering, that open communication, you really do have the ability to, build that trust that's so important to a speak up culture and, having a foundation of ethics in your corporation.
So I've listened to a lot of improv podcasts just because I think it's such a cool art, and I've heard this term a couple of times that like the best comedy people or the best, improv people, they can always find the funny. So whatever the situation is, they have a way to kind of make it funny and find the funny in it. And like, first of all, do you think that that's true? And second of all, what do you think like the corollary is in our space? Because I think there has to be a corollary. And I think, and I would just kind of zoom out. I think finding the funny is like kind of finding a way through like whatever the circumstances that are created are. You know what I'm saying? It's like they're not getting stuck. The wheels aren't spinning. There's and I just think in life there's always a way through, always a way to pick the lock, always a way to persuade the person, always a way over the impediment that's in your way. I think there's always like some funny to find to use that kind of shorthand. So let's talk about that because I think there's probably, as I'm thinking through this journey that you're kind of describing here, there's probably all these like other positive externalities that are probably, have so many more dimensions than we're even sort of scratching the surface of right now.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, if you think about anything at all, funny comes from a problem, essentially, right? Some people have a proclivity to laugh when people trip and fall. I'm raising my hand on that. It's obviously not funny. You have empathy for the person that tripped, but how many times have we like just rewatched a TikTok video of somebody falling over and over again? And I think that if you if you don't take things too seriously, of course, regulations are serious. There are ramifications for missteps. But if you are able to look at it from the view of everything is fixable. Now, whether or not the outcome is what you want it to be, that's a different story. But that's exactly how it is in improv, right? Is that if you, what we do is we try to tell people just have a base reality. Like your base reality is who you are, where we're at, and what are we doing, and try to play that as absolutely normal as possible. And when you play it as normal as possible, eventually somebody says something funny, and or interesting or different, and that's the finding the fun part, right? And so when you are in business and you are looking at a problem and having those conversations, keeping an open mind for that opportunity of, yes, this is a challenging situation, but not trying to not be so stressed about correcting it and fixing it, and allowing, the opportunity for exploration and curiosity really actually creates a more of that fun that we're talking about in business, right? Is just approaching it with curiosity instead of a hard, fast rule. You'll definitely find areas where you can enjoy what you're doing versus feeling, constrained or threatened, or that you have to produce something in an instance. Having that patience to have curiosity, I think, is where you really find the fun in business processes.
So as you're doing your workshops, or you've seen a bunch of people come through improv classes, some probably didn't stick around too long, or like as you're trying to convey some of these principles that clearly sort of extend beyond the improv stage into the real world, what types of people like seem to struggle most with it? Or like what type of blockers do you see where somebody maybe leaves a seminar or something and you have a feeling that like they didn't get all the value that was there for them to pick up and leave with? Are there certain like mindsets that you see over and over again? Is there certain personality types that maybe struggle more with the improvisational requirement to kind of be flexible on your feet and stuff like that? Like, I'm just trying to kind of deconstruct where people kind of slip, because I think like in life, so many times we think someone is just like, oh, they're just wired that way. Oh, they're just really good in school, or that person is just really smart, or they're a great athlete. But if you go back in time, there was probably a time where they weren't that thing, but somewhere along the way, they've started to just define themselves as that thing. And once you define yourself as a funny person, well, then you're always trying to be funny, and you're always learning how sort of funny works, or how to be better at school, or like whatever the field of study is. So I just think like many of the like natural, people with natural ability, it's not really as natural as we think, where it's just kind of hard coded into their DNA for them to be like a great basketball player. There's probably a path that they jumped on, that they got some positive reinforcement with, that they started to build this skill. So I rambled a little bit there, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes,
like what personality things are like so locked in? It's, which of those aspects really are blockers for people to start taking advantage of some of these skills that can be built?
So I do think it's emotional intelligence, essentially, right? I think that if someone is open to a prospect, then, that's the first step. I was teaching a workshop once where I was talking about the concept of yes and we were talking, we worked through the exercise, and I had said, you should always try to say yes to whatever is being brought to you. And what I mean by yes is not saying the word yes and like just moving forward with that momentum. What I mean is being open to listening, right? So the yes in yes and is really that you are acknowledging what somebody else says, and then you are adding to it. Now, acknowledging doesn't mean agreeing. And I think that that's sometimes where people get hung up, is whether or not they believe that they are in the wrong is the first thing, right? And when I say wrong, I'm saying that loosely. And what I mean by that is curious. If they are not being curious, if they're not thinking about the fact that there are different ways to think about things, that's what I find to be the biggest roadblock, because I can have very long conversations with people that are like, if I need someone to do something, they need to do it this way. There's just no black and white. If a house is on fire, you need to get out of the house, and then we start going down that path of like, what if it's this emergency situation, or what if it's that emergency situation? And I will always agree that yes, if a house is on fire, you do need to get out. But also, if the house is on fire, do we need to help an animal that might be trapped somewhere? Is there, is there something else that we need to be looking at instead of just laser locking into what I call like the but or the no, again, from the yes and activity. And so, yeah, I think that those individuals honestly are the ones that could probably use improv most, but they are also the ones that are set in their ways of thinking and do not believe or find it challenging to believe that there is a different way that they could train their brains to think.
So I like that. I like that that flexibility piece. I just so maybe let's talk about this. What are like the worst people at improv? Like if you get partnered with somebody, just describe that, like, the worst improv partner, or, if you're in a scene with somebody and you're like, oh crap, here we go.
Right.
So maybe that's a stupid question because maybe
it's
like,
not. No, it's not. Yeah, I've been that partner actually. I have been. Yeah, and so yeah, I have been that worst improv partner. I think the worst improv partner, when we're talking about improv specifically, and again, this does translate to business, is that person that is like frantic. That is trying too hard. We all know that person that's trying too hard to be funny. And they tend to be a little bit obnoxious. And anything that your scene partner is giving you, and again, I've been there, you don't know what to do with it, right? I've been at several improv auditions, and the first audition that I ever went to was here in my hometown where I live right now, and where I currently teach. So that's an important factor, to this. The first improv audition I went to, I was an absolute maniac. And I just, I wanted to put on a show for the auditors to make sure that they could see that I was funny and that I should be on a team. And I think I was a little kid that had to use the restroom. And then I just kept yelling, mommy, 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 right? And then the improviser that was with me was like, I can't even say anything because this person is just being an obnoxious child, right? And so again, we get those people in business, right? We get those people that are just like, no, I've been here for this long. We've been doing it this way. This is how,
my agenda supersedes everyone's. Yeah.
Yes. And so, again, going back to my comment earlier, I did not make it on a team. And of course I was sad. And of course my ego was hurt. And all of my friends made it on the team. Like there was not a single person that of my friends in improv that did not make it on a team. And I was the odd man out. And
what was that like?
Bruising. It was bruising. But I'm still here, right? And that was about 13 years ago.
I'm just picturing you going back to your house and ripping all your like improv posters off the wall.
So mad. I was so mad.
On the carpet. Yeah.
Yeah, I cried.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I also, this is just dumb, but you know how stand-up comedians, you always see them in the movies where they're like having a whiskey at the bar by themselves.
Yeah.
I did that. I felt like I needed to do that. I went home. I poured my glass of whiskey that I don't drink, by the way, but I had it in the house. Could have been bourbon. What do I know, right? And I sat there on the couch in the dark, and I was like, "This is the life." Right?
At some level, you were like maybe the realest comedian you had ever been at that point.
Yeah, probably, because it is very funny that I thought that this was the way that I was gonna, console myself.
Totally. So. I think I
was crying from that story.
But I think it's always kind of like too much of a self-focus is what I think it is. I think if I'm saying no but or no and in a scene, whatever, it's because I'm really pushing my agenda. If if it's something so black and white and I lack context or understanding on, what this other department is going through, back to your story about, what it took to fill that truck before it went down to Mexico. Like if you don't have that understanding, you don't have that context, you're so focused on self. It's really hard to build the authentic trust that I think is necessary for like real collaboration.
Right.
And I'm always struck by, not always, but just in this conversation, I'm struck by how improv folks, I think they always say, I got your back.
Yes.
Because like when you're on stage, like you have to have each other's back and you have to like not leave them hanging. Like if I'm throwing out like a crazy, I don't know, concept, or like if I'm taking the scene in a different direction, that takes a lot of trust that like you're going to pick up what I'm putting down and that we're going to be able to carry that forward. And I think again, like in business, we run into these same sort of like these same types of moments where someone's coming to you and they're like, hey, I think something got screwed up here. They're facing potential retribution, same as like, being left hanging on stage. And our ability to quickly create that sort of empathy bubble and that sort of safe space for someone to come to us and collaborate, and us knowing that like there's always some funny in this. There's always like a path through this situation, and very rarely is it black and white. And frankly, very rarely do the plans you have persist after you get punched in the face. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just life. That's just business. But I think the ability to do that is really creating this kind of a trust bubble that can unlock so much, and probably is more attractive. Like people are more comfortable being in that sort of environment, that that like bubble that you've created. And there's probably all those other knock-on effects. But anyways, looping back, like I just think it takes an others focus to really build. I think it takes an others focus to be funny. I think it takes an others focus to build like authentic relationships that aren't just so focused on self, your own self-preservation, your own plan, your own like agenda,
Yes, absolutely. Everything you just said is why I keep trying to tell everyone about improv. And I'm not the first. There are plenty of people out there that offer
You're the best
programs.
In a way, you are the best.
I like to think so. But only because I've seen it in myself, right? So, joking aside, that is what struck me, is that, I wasn't creating a safe space for people. I was very demanding. I was very, black and white of, this is the right way and this is not the right way, and you're not doing it the right way, and thinking everybody else was an idiot. You know what I mean? And that's not a way to walk through life, really. We've all had those people that talk down to us, or that are condescending, or that, think that there's a right way to do things. And it doesn't help, it doesn't move things along. And it's just so important that people are able to build these soft skills of communication and empathy, just to the return on investment of an improv class, if you take your team to, like have a workshop or something, is tenfold, 1,000-fold. Sure. And I think that's the thing that I just try to help people understand is like, yes, it seems weird, but in reality, we communicate with people every day. Why not just be aware of how we are doing that, and once you're aware of how other people perceive you, you're aware of what starts working in a collaborative setting, and you get to actually try that on. And that's what you're doing in improv, is you are trying on these different skill sets that maybe are not innate, in your own style, and have the opportunity to try different things on in a safe setting, right? So that, somebody doesn't just think you're weird, which is what I say with my company, is that we get weird, we have fun, and yes, and so
what if our personalities are really not as wired into us as we think? They're really more learned behaviors. Of like, at some point we made a decision, like the highly conscientious, organized people, at some point they were like, oh, this is just a better way to go through life.
Yes.
If that is perhaps true, then it's important, I think, to your point, to like try things that are outside of your comfort zone, because some of these habits might just be like a carapace that you've built over time, and you need to get some more flexibility. I want to talk a little bit about, like, it seems like, if I'm like remembering, or if I listened appropriately here, it seems like you just kind of separately kind of got into this comedy thing, and you tried stand up for a while, and then you took improv, and that really resonated with you. And then as you kind of progressed down that improv path, you started having these realizations that maybe caused some self-reflection, or caused you to like look at your self-image, or reconsider your self-image. Because I think most people who are, type A tough people, they probably don't view themselves as the jerk that many of the people that maybe report to them do.
No, of course not. I didn't think I
saying?
was a jerk. Right. Yeah. No, I didn't think I was a jerk.
I just want to talk about like that light bulb moment.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you're like, man, I'm kind of a jerk. What can I do? I'm going to get into improv to like shave these edges off myself.
Yeah.
But it seems like as you got more flexible, you started to look back at maybe some other tendencies or something like that to say like, okay, there's a different way that I can sort of move through life. Talk to me about that kind of revelation.
Sure. The first time it happened, I was actually in an improv scene, and it was at a practice in a class. It was probably a level 2 class, maybe a level 3. I was in a scene with another scene partner, and we were playing video games, and we were 2 kids playing video games. And I was being mean in the scene, which is my go-to.
You were just showing up. You were being yourself in that circuit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Like I was just being the bully that I was, because that is the thing that improv does, is it actually, when you first start doing improv, you are bringing yourself to the scene, whether you realize it or not. Right. And, and as they're telling you to let go, whatever little kind of correctors you have on your,
that like facades start to shed away, and like your real self is starting to come out. You're like, oh my God.
It does. It comes out. And so the instructor for that class paused us from the scene. And they said, Cindy, are you trying to be mean?
Is this fun? Is this supposed to be funny mean, Cindy? What is this?
Is this supposed to be funny mean? And I said, no, like what? Like I'm just doing a scene,
Right.
And they said people that actually come to watch improv are going to a show to get outside of reality. They're going to a show to remove themselves from real situations. And if you're fighting in scenes, you could just be reminding people that, the world can be an ugly place, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so that's the concept of punching up. We say that in comedy, that you want to punch up and not down. Yeah. And then, that's something you learn as well, right? I mean, we have a lot of instances of, all of the isms, racism, sexism, ageism. And that's something that, we hit on in comedy, in improv comedy, of when we are doing a scene, if something doesn't feel right, we pause, we stop, we talk about it. And that's something that we don't have an opportunity to do every day in the office setting, like we got to worry about whether or not HR is going to knock on the door. But being able to have those open conversations about how someone might feel in those instances. And also, like, why did you say that, or why did that come out? It's the foundation for self-reflection, right? Yeah. So you don't know that some of these biases might be living in you because our society is set up the way that it is, and we are in our own bubble of our community, and so. It really lends itself as a great opportunity to have conversations about those hidden biases, microaggressions, and again, it all leads back to that self-reflection, because I was just teaching an improv class about 3 weeks ago where I specifically was like, we are not going to use this, this topic as a conversation within the improv scene. And here is why. And then the improv scene started, and we used the topic, right? Because we just got to it. And the individual that was in the scene, felt a little bit picked on because, again, they're newer to improv. And this is a new skill that we are learning to be able to talk about these things and work through, problem solving. And I said, no, the way that society is, we just want to be really careful about how we are presenting ourselves. And when we talk about being careful, we're not saying that you have to censor yourself, but what we're saying is you need to understand where the comment might have come from or why you're acting on that the way that you are, so that we can get to a place where everyone feels safe in the space. Again, that's what I love about it. I love the opportunity to have those conversations. And I love the opportunity that it provides people to actually think through their ideas and where they might have come up with certain stereotypes and that sort of thing. I know I rambled on about that, but I'm
trying to imagine what the topic was and why they felt so picked on.
Well, I don't know.
All good.
Yeah.
So do you feel like as you've gotten better at this, like you see the world in like a different, like resolution, like you're just more tuned into things? You notice more details, or do you feel like it's just faster and easier for you to just like connect and be there? So what I'm asking is, like, we kind of like visualize time as like extending beyond, extending behind us, and then also kind of extending, in the future. But like, you can't experience the past. And like, when it was the past, it was just the now. And like, when somebody's not present, they're living in the past and thinking about something that's happened, or they're living in anxiety in the future, right? Like when somebody's not like in it with you, they're not like in the now. They're like, their mind is like sort of somewhere else on this sort of timeline.
Right.
I would imagine that like when you're really flowing in an improv scene or whatever, you're there with them. You're like absolute, like you're not thinking about what you have to do when you get home. Like you're in that moment and in that now. And I think that's really kind of the basis of any kind of connection, not just like comedic connection or like improv connection. It's you're here with me, and like I've been able to like quiet everything else around me to like really kind of focus in. That's probably a muscle that you get better at. But I'm saying in your ability to like do that, assuming that that's right, do you feel like that has allowed you to see sort of more things in sort of the now, with like a different resolution, maybe gradations of the black and white that maybe, was the previous lens you looked through. Now you just can see sort of more gray or more nuance or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, we're talking about living in the moment and being in the moment. I am definitely the type of boss, or manager, whatever word we're using for that role at the moment, that would be sending an email while my employee's talking to me, like, and how rude.
Some people do ramble, though. I mean, some people are ramblers.
People do, but like also, yes. So like in an improv scene, a killer is not paying attention. Like that is it. You will see improvisers all of the time saying, "Wait, what did you say? Can you like tell me again?" Because for a moment, they lost that connection. For a moment, they were worried about whether or not the audience was laughing, or for a moment, whether or not the thing that they did was funny. We all do that. And we do that with emails. I will, so I, make a response for myself of like, the minute I notice that I'm veering off of the moment, I actually will just shut my eyes and stop the distractions of everything. So that I can just like pause and listen to, what my coworker is saying, or, someone is trying to tell me. Whereas before, I wouldn't even have recognized it. I would have thought that I can multitask, right? We all think we can multitask. But being in the moment is definitely, again, a learned ability, a learned skill. And so when, to your point, I am very much an introvert. What is it called? Like an extroverted introvert, where I look like I am extroverted, but in reality,
all introverts call themselves ambiverts. This is the new thing. So you're an introvert. If you think you're an ambivert, you're an introvert. Okay?
Yeah. So, that's the other thing is like when when you are in the moment, and you have learned the skill of like putting yourself out there and focusing and listening instead of pulling back, I think you do make yourself more accessible to other people, which, is more inviting and again creates those opportunities for a higher level of communication. So I still do it. Like I will still be trying to finish up my email when people come in, but when I notice it, I will stop and close my eyes.
Yeah, so I guess I'm going to try that. So if any of the people that work with me are listening, if you come into my office and you see me with my eyes closed, I'm listening. So keep going, keep talking, please.
Yeah. Whatever you have to do to get rid of the distraction.
Exactly.
Right?
So do you feel like as you've gotten better at improv, do you feel like you're just kind of funnier?
I think I'm more open to funnier because I am also the type of person that has to explain, like I mansplain. If somebody says, "Oh, there's a problem," instantly I go into the explanation of like why it's a problem. But now I do find that instead of feeling the need to like set things right, I might actually just say something funny instead.
So have you heard this quote? Never complain, never explain.
Yeah, I've heard that, but I'm not sure where it's from.
Yeah, I don't know where it's from either.
No.
But I just feel like so much of explanations are like this self-preservation thing. And like the self-preservation thing is kind of the antithesis of being in the moment and like being a good improv partner. I don't know what like the word for that is.
Right.
And, as I'm thinking through like the things that cause this sort of black and white blockage or the moats that are all, dug around our departments to where we're kind of apart from the business when we want to be proactive and be in there. It's coming from some kind of self-preservation, like, root, you know what I'm saying? Like how much explaining comes from me not wanting to look stupid or you have the wrong impression of me, or how much of how I might sort of come across with my subordinates is a function of me not wanting to look stupid to my boss. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I just love the idea that in improv, you get this sort of like free, it's like a free little sandbox to like go through a bunch of iterations of looking stupid and realizing like, okay, I didn't die from looking stupid and it's really not that big of a deal. Like, do you feel like it's given you a lot more flexibility to like maybe turn down that self-preservation, dial that maybe got dialed up when you were a kid, or like it did for me for sure. Like, and some of us kind of go through our whole lives with that on 10 when we don't need it to be on 10 anymore. Like, is there any connection to what I'm talking about?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think that you're training yourself to, embrace the unexpected. I think you're trying to figure out how to support each other, like having each other's back. And with that, comes that flexibility.
I am here.
Yeah.
I'm throwing a curveball at you. This is like an improv curveball. I just wanted to see how you're going to roll with it on stage here.
Yeah, we're just leaving it go.
You did great. You didn't even bat an eye. How are we doing on time here? Oh my gosh, we're right at the end. Yeah. Okay, so tell me about how people can find you, how people can learn more about this this new business.
Well, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn if you're connected with me, and or if you're not, there is a Good Human Improv Company page on LinkedIn. And the other opportunity is, you could go to my website, and that is goodhumanimprov.com. And I think that improv offers something for everyone, even though, you may think improv is not for you. We all communicate, we all talk to other humans. And that's the point, right? Is I would love to see improv go mainstream like yoga. And, it's not just for actors. I'm proof of that. I never took an acting class in my life. But it definitely helps build confidence, spark your creativity. And it's also just a ton of fun.
It's a ton of fun. It makes you a lot more likable. It makes your job a lot easier.
It does. Yeah.
There really are a ton of benefits. And, again, as we're entering this new era of what I think ethics and compliance is becoming, I think more and more people are realizing that our job to build this true culture of integrity is like a job of influence. And that influence by its nature takes some kind of a connection. And it's not like it all has to be face-to-face. You're not going to talk to, maybe every single person in your organization, but you have to be connectable. You have to be relatable. You have to have, like, if we're going to build these authentic connections that are going to be sources of risk intelligence for us to improve our organization or to, mitigate risk across the business, it takes that sort of people connection. And, yeah, I just love that you're doing this. I love that we're having this conversation and that, more people are kind of waking up to the opportunity that the stuff we've just spent the last hour talking about is for their career.
Yeah, I know. Again, improv really fundamentally is about making ethical choices in the moment, because you don't want to put your scene partner in a situation that they don't want to be in, or that the audience doesn't want to see. And so you're making decisions quickly and with responsibility, with limited information. And I think all of those are skills that we have in the ethics and compliance field.
I love it. All right, Cindy, we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Great. Thanks for having me. Bye.